I want to start by thanking everyone who spoke and moderated yesterday for the absolutely scintillating day that we had. It was marvelous from start to finish. And I expect today to be no less exciting. And of course, we are beginning with the doyen, in many ways, the founder of the field, someone whom we have all paid many respects and acknowledged our indebtedness to, which is Jagdish Mittal ji, who through his own collecting and his own deep scholarship and the founding of his museum has contributed so very much and knows such a lot that truly we have an ocean of knowledge here. May I ask Shobita Punja to please come and say, introduce very briefly Mittal Sahib prior to his talk. Shobita is known to many of us in the audience. She is someone with many years of experience in the fields of art history, cultural policy, heritage management. She, as an art historian, is known for her writing on Indian temples, particularly on Khajuraho and on Indian museums. But she has also spent long years at the helm of institutions like the Center for Cultural Resources and Training, which actually gives inputs to school teachers all over the country on Indian cultural heritage. She has been deeply involved with INTAC, and she was running the National Culture Fund until very recently. Shobita.
Namaskar to all of you, and may I really begin by thanking Renu, Kavita, Preeti for what a wonderful day we had yesterday. So intense and so rich with lovely memories forever and ever. So thank you so much for yesterday. It's a pleasure and a real honor for me to introduce to you Mr. Jagdish Mittal. You all know of him as a great art connoisseur, a collector, an art historian, and most important, a rasika. He began by training as a painter in Shantiniketan, and he always says that being a painter, knowing how to mix colors, to make colors, actually helped him so much in the work that he was going to undertake later in his life. In 1953, he moved to Hyderabad, and with his wife there, he began his whole journey of collection of Indian art. We know of this collection, and many people yesterday, many scholars yesterday referred to his amazing collection, and it is something that scholars around the world are very grateful for, because he managed to save and preserve objects of art both from South India and North India. His collection consists of paintings, Mughal paintings, Pahari paintings, paintings from Chambal, rare textiles, Deccan scroll paintings, terracottas, metalwork, and a whole range of objects. And this entire collection, he then bequeathed to the nation in 1976 with the creation of a public trust now called the Jagdish Kamla Mittal Museum of Indian Art. Whenever you talk about Jagdish Mittal, people talk about his amazing eye, his ability to see details, that discerning eye that sees so much into paintings, sculpture, and artifacts. He says that it is because of his really wide experience in seeing artworks across the world. He has a phenomenal memory. So a small motif from a carpet, he can connect to a painting, he can connect to a piece of filigree work that he has in his collection. So it's this wide experience and knowledge that he has shared with the entire world. The museum shares its collection through its publications and books. Over 70 books have been written, and even today he's talking about the next 2 publications that he has in mind. Through exhibitions and loans to museums, we are able to see the great artworks that he has collected over the years. He has been acknowledged for his contribution in this field with several awards. The government of Andhra Pradesh gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2010, and the government of India gave him one of the highest civilian awards, the Padma Shri, in 1990. When you ask him, because he's this year celebrating his 90th birthday, what is the secret of his long life? He will always say, it is in the contemplation of Indian art. So thank you very much. We thank him for being with us this morning, and we thank him for saving so many rare pieces of artwork through his collection. This morning he's going to talk to us about metalware of the Deccan, BIDRI and Filigree, and share with us some of the outstanding pieces from his collection. Thank you again, Jagdish.
But BIDRI is a peculiar type of metalwork which is so distinct style or process of making metalwork inlay. It's a type of inlay when one metal is inlaid on another. Actually, the inlay is done also in steel. When gold or silver is inlaid, that is also inlaid work. But what is the difference between BIDRI? Then I checked up, they told that this is 85% of zinc, about 12% copper, and 3 or 4% tin or other alloys. So that whole composition makes it a BIDRI. But then the next thing is more complicated, why it is so distinct from any other metalware anywhere in the world. Then it's not only inlay. Inlay has been done on bronze in Gupta bronzes, later bronzes, even Kashmir bronzes, and also in Middle East, Arabia, Morocco. All these places had been famous. In China also it was inlaid. But now the distinct metal alloy is one thing. The second thing is the blackening paste which makes the BIDRI look black and against which the silver or gold inlay shines. Then I studied the technique, how it was done. The first basic process is that you make a mold of an object to be made, a sarai or a cup or a plate. So when it is made, it looks white like silver. A blackening paste is given over it on which certain designs are cut out, and there is a groove along the edges. And silver pieces, or brass pieces, or gold pieces of the same size are cut, placed over the design, and you will think how they fixed. Although the size of the pieces cut is also the same size, but actually when it is beaten, silver expands and gets into the grooves which are along the edges. Some people think it is pasted, it is not. That is the very complicated thing, that it has to be very precisely executed, the grooves have to be very right, pressure for beating silver has to be very right so that it fits in very well in all the grooves around. When it is done and finished, this inlay is done, the third craftsman gives it a blackening paste, finishes it, and the blackening paste is some sort of a chemical composition found in the soil around the Bidar fort, which was used. Now, of course, they use chemical processes for blackening it. But that charm, that blackening paste retains its charm forever. It remains black unless it is damaged by any chemical process or something. It remains black for centuries, because some of the very early pieces of BIDRI we know, which are about over 400 years. Now, the art of BIDRI, which eventually, now recent researchers show that it started at Bidar, and then in the 18th century it was being experimented and being done in Lucknow because of sub-contact with the Awadh court and the Hyderabadi court. It reached Murshidabad in Bengal and Purnia. So all these centers were producing BIDRI of some distinct type, but Bidar remained the main center for making Bidri. In early 19th century, some craftsmen from Bidar came to Hyderabad, settled here. They started working for the Nizam, because now there are dated Bidris which show that Bidri was being done at Hyderabad also in early 19th century. I'll show you some of those pieces. The main thing about the early Bidris is that until about 1700, between say 1600 to 1700, 50% of the early Bidris were two metals. People think it is gold and silver, but it was not gold, but in very rare cases gold and silver were inlaid, but it was mostly brass and silver. From after 1700 in early 18th century, perhaps because of the cost factor, when the prices started going up, the preference was always for plain silver Bidri. Now the 3 or 4 types of techniques are used and they are all named. When the silver inlay or gold inlay is flush with the surface of the Bidri, it is called Tehnishan. When it is, the inlay is flush on the background and the black design shows, that is the reverse process, that is known Mehtabi. If it is raised above the surface, it is called Tehnishan and Zarbuland. And if it is wire work, it is Tarkashi work. So all these things are technical terms used for the varieties of techniques used. Now the most difficult itself is the Mehtabi work. When I show you the images, it will explain to you what is the difference, because the black design against silver looks like the Nelo work, which is a type of enameling work in black. In 1956, when the states were organized, the Bidar craftsmen in larger number came and settled in Hyderabad when Bidar became part of the Karnataka state. In fact, Bidar had been ruled by the Bahmanis as a center. In the late 15th century, their ministers or police commissioner, the Barid Sahis, conquered it. It was conquered by the Bijapur rulers in 1619, and then 1656 the Mughals annexed it, and when Asaf Jah the first conquered the entire Deccan and became the Nawab of the Deccan or the Nizam in 1724, this area. So it has various influences. The history of the origin of Bidri itself is very confused state. But now, of course, people are accepting there are several factors, because the original early scholars or the craftsmen used to say it started during Bahmani period, which has no historical basis. There are several other legends about the origin of Bidri which are just hearsay, and they don't can be proved with historical facts or other evidences. Then there is a mention that because there was great influx of the migrants from the Middle East, Persia and Iraq and these countries, they brought the inlay technique to Bidar. And then that itself emerged by the experiment of some craftsmen there. I think we have to forget all those other influences, but it's known that the Barid Shahi fort has 4 or 5 guns inlaid with metal on bronze, silver or brass inlay is done. So it means the craftsmen in that area knew the technique of inlay. But the other inspiration could have come from the Rangin Mahal, which Navina ji also yesterday showed. It's a palace made in the late 15th century when the white mother of pearl is inlaid on black basalt. So all these two, knowledge of the technique and the inspiration or the charm of the black and white inlay perhaps inspired some craftsman, and by accident he discovered this technique of Bidri, and that started from there, and that's the history. Nowadays, of course, there are 2 centers. Lucknow, there is no more Bidri. Murshidabad, no more Bidri. Only Bidar as well as Hyderabad. But it's a pity that by the end of the 19th century, the decline in the Bidar work started, because some of their works were being imitated on the basis of European metal or porcelain which was being imported. Some Europeans had become interested in acquiring objects, so sort of mixed sort of designs are done. One thing about the shape of the BIDRI is the earlier huqqas were made in globular shape. As you know, Asad Beg, the Mughal envoy who went to Bijapur in 1604, he brought back tobacco smoking, which was already introduced there. Although it fascinated the Mughal court, but Jahangir prohibited that it should not be used, is something harmful when he consulted his physicians. So no Mughal minister or officials were using hookahs, no Mughal ruler except for Muhammad Shah in early 19th century started smoking. No Bijapuri ruler smoked hookah until the middle of the 17th century. But on the lower level, the court officials, bankers, jewelers, and the other elite of the Mughal court, the small states in Rajasthan, Punjab, Hills, and central India and Bengal were fascinated by the charm of smoking hookah. In many cases, it was not the royalty, the kings or emperors of the Mughal court or the Deccan who smoked hookah with BIDRI bases. They were either gold, silver or something, but BIDRI hookahs were mostly patronized or used by the bankers, rajas, small states and common people. According to the status, the quality of work was being done. But I must point out the early hookahs continued to be in globular in shape with a base below. And then from the 17th century onwards, early 18th century, you start getting a skirted hookah, which I will show you. And as the decades passed, towards the end of the 18th century, the skirting became more and more. That is a sign to identify the date of a BIDRI. In the 19th century, various shapes, early 19th, various shapes, very skirted hookah, waisted hookah, bell-shaped hookah, trumpet-shaped hookah, flower vase-shaped hookah, varieties of hookah, or kalia, which was introduced from Iran. A bird-shaped hookah was also introduced, and these were the various shapes. Now, of course, the BIDRI is being patronized by cooperative societies. They are being exported and made use in Bidar, exported to city, Emporia is using, but it's a pity. The quality of the craft has declined because of the cost factor, unnecessary interference and lack of knowledge of people who patronize BIDRI in the government emporias, because they ask them to make Ajanta figures, models of the portraits of the important leaders in the country, but that's not, each craft has its limitations and its charm. If that is disturbed, actually deterioration is going to happen. But even in otherwise, because they are not using the same precision of work, they have resorted using only line work, which is simple. They are not cutting the pieces of the size and fitting. So it is losing the only feeling. There is no movement, it's only some skill. There are craftsmen who can do very finely executed hookahs, but it has lost its energy, lost its charm. The shapes are not very good, and those sort of compromises have spoiled. Although there are efforts that the BIDRI should be revived, but it is not being taken care of the right people with right designs. This is the design factor which is creating problem. Otherwise, it's a craft which has lot of potential. It can be promoted in future. Now I'll show images and talk about these. Now this is what the Rangeen Mahal, the inlay, black inlay. This is late 15th century. Now you can see the white inlay. It looks as if a large panel of BIDRI work, but it's a black granite on which mother of pearl inlay has done. It's a late 15th century Rangeen Mahal palace at Bidar. Next one, please. Now this is one of the very early BIDRI pieces, although we thought of another piece which I will show next. Fortunately, thanks to Navina Heather, of course I got that image. It's in the Metropolitan Museum. It's supposed to be late 16, but I think it's about 1600, 1620. But it's a dome-like sculpture, architectural shape which has been used. The design is very fine in arabesques of silver flowers and brass arborus within which the silver flowers are set. A very simple, very elegant, powerful shape. Next one. Now this is a BIDRI which has a date corresponding to this in our museum, Jagdish and Kamla Mittal Museum. This is a date October 1634, but sometimes it was suspected it's not, but must point out the Mughal influence has entered the Deccan after 1600. There were trade relations, business people, there were no bars. So this Mughal motive was somehow introduced. This type of work, there are 2 or 3 other works which I will date to, say, mid-17th century. This one and next one is under Aftaba in the Victoria Albert Museum. It's a beautiful execution of the Mehtabi work, whereas the background is silver and the design looks black. It's a highly complicated technique where the background is kept very evenly so that the silver sheet of same thickness is inlaid, so there is no ups and downs, it's same flush silver, so it's very complicated. Suppose you are making this hookah in reverse, like say Tehnishan work, it will take 10 times more to execute a object of this quality or this technique. So that's a technique one has to take note of. The next piece is a very, very fine, very early piece in Salarjung Museum, inlaid in silver and brass. This is actually aquatic creatures in a river where they have these fishes, tortoises and other things. It's a large size salver of BIDRI in silver and brass. Next one. This is a very important BIDRI object in the Berlin Museum. I mean, something like this. There is another piece of brass inlay in the Metropolitan Museum. This also second half of 17th. This is also the third quarter of the 17th. This in the Mittal Museum, 1675 or so. And now you see the way they are dropping. These are not a Mughal design. People think that most of the BIDRI designs were Mughal. That's not right, because this is a design you never find in any Mughal pattern. Although this beautifully flower spray, I mean, has been so beautifully composed and very perfectly designed, perfect shape, and I think there is no alteration somewhere. It's very perfectly balanced pattern. Next one. Now this is another hookah when the tulip design has been beautifully spaced out, and this all third quarter of the 17th century. Next one. Now this is a very important hookah in Ashmolean, where you see a sort of landscape. I mean, in very few hookahs, they experiment with human figures, architecture, landscapes and things. This is one of those hookahs for the late 17th century. Next one. Now this is another of the landscape type hookahs, and with the palm trees, and these are typical of the Deccan. Yeah. Now this is a very ingenious design. This is a part of a box where you find the wave-like pattern of brass and background and this flower against it. And where do you find this Mughal? People have repeatedly pointed out they are Mughal designs. It is not right, because these are exclusively Deccan designs which I see here. Next one. This is another bowl in the museum where the curling leaf and very simple pattern creates a beautiful design. I mean, things like this can be even now copied in various objects, not one should copy the same thing again and again, but the motifs and the techniques can be used for recreating new patterns, new shapes. Next one. Now, this is a plate which was exhibited in the Victoria Albert Museum, also in the Metropolitan Museum. This is about 1675 and about 12 inches in diameter. Next one. Yeah. This is another piece which is, I think, about 1700, 1710, also to metal, but beautifully crafted, where you find Mehtabi work in the center, also Tehnishan work is there, Mehtabi work, and then wire work is also used. All the three techniques have been used in creating this piece. Next one. This is a piece which is, I think, about early 18th century, but very unusual pattern of iris is an aftaba. And this was also exhibited. Apart from these utility objects, the BIDRI craftsmen created these talismanic bowls which are normally the Shia Durud, in which in this actually the inlay is the Nishan, that is first with the background, but you see it's very complicated calligraphy, perhaps was done by some other calligrapher, and the BIDRI craftsman executed it. The outside has beautiful linear design. Next one. Now this is another talismanic cup with the Mehtavi technique, where the lettering is in black and outside you find a beautiful proportional pattern. Now, of course, also for the export to Middle East, they are making, metal inlay of the calligraphy. It is cut by acid process and then inlaid. So the charm of writing calligraphy individually, that charm and lyricism has gone, and they have become very static, machine-made product-like things. Next one. Now, this is actually a 1750, 1760 object, also in the globular shape, but very typical Deccani design in this floral. There is another hookah which I have, is a reverse of the same design. Next one. Sorry, so it's not here. Anyway, this is a poppy flower design which became very popular by 1775 in the Deccan. It was also used in Mughal, but in fact, Deccan, it became more popular because even in Deccani paintings of, say, late 18th century, you will find flower beds in the front. They are textiles with poppy flower designs, and this is one of them. Next one. Now, this is a beautiful shape with teardrops of like pattern all over the body. It is just a cup, but it's very elegant in proportion and form. It looks like some of these Turkish metalware shapes. Next one. Now, these are meerfurs. Meerfurs are actually objects. You see, you use summer carpet, but sometimes with the breeze it will go up. So keep these carpets in position. There are 4 pieces which are kept on 4 corners. But now you see that tulip-like flower shape has been used and create this beautiful practical object for day-to-day use. Next one. Now, this is another hookah of 1750 or 60. And this has flutings, and then in the flutings, the design is done. But as I told that, although the globular hookah after 1725 became less popular, but even up to 1750-60, they continued to use that hookah, but the neck became longer. That shows that it is not that earlier phase, but the neck is different. That shows but in craftsmanship and design, it's really very, very good. Now, this very rarely in the later period, the figurative hookahs were made. This is the late 18th century where you see Nizam's army is working. It came from the Nizam's court, Nizam palace, that it was very specially made for the court, where the human figures, after hunting, they are coming back. So this is, although a late example, say about late 18th century or even 1800, but exceptionally well done, beautifully designed and shaped. Next one. Now, in the 18th century itself, there were some very simple objects. Still, there were craftsmen who could create beautiful shape. This is a small size spittoon, say for carrying when they are bedside, they will keep a spittoon because they used to chew pan. Then they will keep, it's almost like flower-like. Next one. Now, this is for a spice box, also inlaid in the pattern of, it's a peacock feather, and it's inlaid in wire technique. Next one. Now as I told, after 1800, various shapes were introduced in BIDRI work. This is the late 18th century work, or 1800. From the shape was imported from Iran. It's known as kalia because it's a bud shaped. And there are varieties of shapes, long, small, of these. Sometimes they could be very small, 4 or 5. It could be held in hand. And pieces like this, they would be kept on a stand. And there are varieties of shapes of this type. Next one. Now, this is a almost flower-based type, and this is about 1840, and one of the very, very fine examples of late fur. One thing I'll point out that I have noticed that the very, very fine quality of BIDRI, if it was made for the royalty, it's not only the quality of finish or inlay, they were very highly varnished. That sheen shows that lot of pain and care had been taken. Next one. Now, this is a piece which is dated 1818, although I got published a book in which all the dates have been given. Now you say this is about early 19th century when the skirting becomes more wide. Next one. Now this is actually a piece also about 1840, 1850. It's a Mehtavi technique with large size bowl. The poppy design has been used, but you see how difficult it should have been to cut out the background and leave the lines as if it is a brushwork drawing. Next one. Now this is last piece dated 1859, also the name of the Karigar Malappa. Means there were varieties of hookah shapes, beautiful craftsmen were still existing, but now you see it has, technique-wise it is very well done, but it has become slightly stiff design. Otherwise there is perfect control over the technique. There were craftsmen, but after that there was very sharp decline because of changing fortune of the Deccani Nawabs. Means they were, although the BIDRIs were still being used for marriage dowries, but the quality was deteriorating decades after decade. I think that's the last in the BIDRI. Sorry, I was showing also some others. This is a good example of Lucknow BIDRI. You will find hunting scenes and patterns and landscapes, architecture is there. So again, this is a shape in Deccan or as well as in Lucknow. The skirting was wide for the early 19th century hookahs. So after this, I'll speak about filigree work in the Deccan. Then if there are any questions and things we can answer later on. I'll now start with the next lecture on another metal technique. And this is a lecture about the filigree work. Filigree work is a technique in which it's a pure wire work. It is not filigrane because it's only wire and some grains are there. It's a let. So, but there are two types of filigrees in which either it's open work, which is only wire inlay like a trellis is shown. The other type is in which on a copper sheet or silver sheet, the inlay and this wire work is overlaid. So that's the open work BIDRI and covered BIDRI. There are two types. Mostly in Karimnagar, the BIDRI, the filigree was in open work, and it was started there for about 250 years, as the craftsmen say. Karimnagar is a place about 115 miles from Hyderabad in the present state of Telangana. Although this technique became popular and there are some examples of very fine filigree, the origin of this is mysteriously, again like the BIDRI work, it's not very definite how and when filigree started being done in the Deccan in the Karimnagar state. To prove that, of course, there are two supportive evidences. One is from the craftsmen who say that filigree started in Karimnagar in about 250 years, 260 years, and that is supported by some examples of filigree. There is some in the Clive collection, which is accession in 1771, that it was already there, but it is definitely Karimnagar type. There are others also about the same date, including this piece, which I'll show you next. Susan Straub also published that piece as Karimnagar work. Jabrowski published also that piece as Karimnagar work. So there is no doubt about the overall look of a very early filigree work done at Karimnagar. But it's a pity that apart from the other centers of filigree work in the country or the subcontinent, the others were Cuttack in Odisha, Dhaka in Bengal, East Bengal, and Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh, Kota in Rajasthan, and in southern India at Trichinopalli and Cochin. But these were all different. In the later times, that is about after 1800, there was no filigree work done at Cochin or Krishnapalli, only Dhaka, Cuttack and Karimnagar remain. But it's a pity that Karimnagar, in spite of being the best center or the finest quality of work being done there, it was not known till recently. Because the scholars who wrote about Indian metalwork, like Boydwood, T.N. Mukherjee, and Mr. Watts, who wrote in 1903, because the exhibitions which are organized, international exhibitions in Paris, London, etc., only the filigree work or Cuttack or Dhaka was exhibited. But why not Karimnagar? Karimnagar work being a very fine quality, very finely executed, and the production was not being very large. It was consumed in the state. So it was not known outside the country, so it was not recognized among the scholars until recently. But as I show from the examples, you will be convinced yourself that there is a lot of difference. Now the present day collectors of filigree will vouch that compared to the filigree work now, Cuttack, it would be 4 to 5 times costlier than the work done today at Cuttack as well as Karimnagar. In spite of decadence at both places, still Karimnagar filigree fetches better price. Say for example, a good filigree of Karimnagar will be about 1500 per gram to 2000 per gram. The old filigree of taken, the early phase. The Cuttack would be about 250 or 300. So that's a misconception, wrong information about the qualities of BIDRI. Why that difference? What is the difference that I'll show when I show the images? Next one, please. Now this is a BIDRI where, filigree in which they overlaid. This is a late 17th century work in my collection. It's everything has been overlaid on a sheet of silver, but very rare technique. It's overlaid, but again perforated through. So it looks as if everything is open work filigree. It's a very interesting, fine example of filigree work. It is rare technically also. It's not overall overlaid work. It is partially overlaid, but gives the illusion of being altogether. Now this is the piece which is in the Clive collection, which we agree that it is about 1750 or so from Karimnagar. Look at the fine technique being used. The next one, again a wave-like pattern. I'll agree it's about 1750, also from Karimnagar. The next piece also is a mid-18th century piece from filigree, Karimnagar. Next one. Now this is in our collection, also I'd say 1750. Now I'll explain to you about the technique. The technique is that first the craftsman makes a design on a paper, draws wire through various gauges of different, say 14 gauge, 20 gauge, 18 gauge, 24 gauge, 36 gauge. 30 gauge, 36 is very, very fine. First he will make a pattern with a 14 gauge wire, within which he will set a second pattern called filigree and a filler, which is a next grade, say about 20 gauge wire, which I'll show in other design where you can see very clearly. Then he will draw another fine wire of say 36. So those wires actually, when they are twisted, they get a sort of grain on the edges. That is a sign of very fine filigree. Now of course they draw the wire machine made and you don't see. The early filigrees will always have a grain if you see magnified. Now after all these things and everything is overlaid and laid on a wooden board with wax. So, but how these things are soldered? So after a solution of borax is boiled and spread over the plate so that everything is in order. Then they will cut out pieces of, tiny pieces of silver alloyed with copper, and those are just spread all over. And when the piece is heated, everything gets soldered and the piece becomes soldered onto the piece. So after that, it is taken up from the board after heating, and then after that it is cleaned and then polished. So that's basically the technique. And Karimnagar or Dhaka or Cuttack, everywhere the technique is same. The difference lies in the design, in the execution, in wire work. Whereas the Karimnagar craftsman can use very, very fine work, very closely placed scrolls or these loops or these patterns have been set very evenly. Even today, they are able to do that sort of work. Next one. This is a pandan tray where it's a complete place, about 1775. There is a box for pan so that it's aired because of the jali work. Next one. Now, this is a chopra. I mean, all these filigree works are now in my collection, where the very fine Karimnagar work of, say, about 1800. And this is another box with filigree. This sort of scrolling work is very typical of the early 18th century filigree. Now, partially it is gilded to give a very rich effect. So that piece is also a small pan box in which that design on the top is jade work. I mean, to make it rich and precious, jade has been inlaid with gold and diamonds, and that's a very interesting. But look at the beautiful pattern, beautiful shape. Next one. Now, this is a gulab pass, also from Karimnagar, early 19th century. Now, see the elegance of the shape. Next one. Now, this is another pandan, early 19th century, or say 1825 to 50, where it is sometimes the bottom is sheet of silver, but in this case, it's all over, top, bottom, sides, everything is filigree and very finely executed. Next one. Now, these are two very small boxes, about 1.5 inches each. Now, apart from these boxes and pill boxes, they used to make perfume fish. If it opens the mouth, there is a small bottle where perfume is filled in. So these are all examples of fine filigree work from Karimnagar. Next one. Now, this is also not in our museum, this is in the Prince of Wales Museum, about 1850. A very good example of late filigree work from Karimnagar. Next one. Oh, this is about 1920. From 1920, and the lower one is about 1950 from Karimnagar, a peacock-shaped perfume box, and then this is also a perfume container bottle. Now, even until 1920s, there were craftsmen, but even today, the Karimnagar filigree retains the charm of its shapes, execution. Nowhere it is over-exaggerated. But now you see the next one. And this is a gold pendant, also done in Karimnagar, a very good example of early 19th century. But most of the filigree work is done in silver, because sometimes they will not enter precious gold unless it is commissioned by a royalty and some control is kept on the craftsman. So most of the filigree is done in silver, although working in gold is easier. Next one. Now I'm showing the Odisha work. That card is supposed to be about 1830s, and this plate below is also about 1880. Now you see the inlaid, the patterns are very loose. They are not very compactly laid. Designs have been more Europeanized even at that early period. Next one. Now, you see, this is the work of the 1875, rather rough, although it's in the Prince of Wales Museum. Now, the hanging ghungroos below, it's unnecessary, superfluous, but I don't know why these sort of things, the shapes become too baroque, too ornate, so that loses the charm of the craft. Next one. Now, this is a late 19th century, now in the Dhaka Museum, but is a work of Kathak work. So now the superplastics, I mean unwanted, but any technique or any craft object has some sort of limitations. But why make some decorative objects which have no functionality as a craft, but they would be just decorative items in a room. Next one. Now this is a very recent work, say about 1950 from Dhaka, Kathak. Next one. Now, unfortunately, in Kathak, after 1956, there became a trend of decorating the Durga Puja pandal, where the goddess is wearing filigree jewelry. The background is done in filigree work, and it started with 150 kilograms of silver, and now the last one, about 8 or 9 years, was 500 kilograms of silver was used in making them. Year after year, they make sort of this. I mean, this is some sort of not only decadence, but unnecessary showmanship in spite of devotion. I mean, why waste the craft to that extent that when it is melted, you don't retrieve more than 75–80%, 20% is lost. So think of the value of say 500 kilograms of silver being used in decorating pandals. There is not one, but 8 or 9 pandals are made every year. Next one. Now, this is a Dhaka filigree. I mean, almost like the Kathak filigree, but again the decadence of the technique and workmanship is there. The Dhaka craftsmen also cater to the needs of foreigners, made for their daily use, bracelets, jewelry. Also Kathak, most of the jewelry was acquired by the foreigners. So the designs were made according to their taste, like lily design, flower design, butterfly designs. After 1875, they are mostly being sold at Dhaka, Kathak, as well as in Calcutta market, all over Bengal. This jewelry was being mostly sold to foreigners, rich landlords, but there was a custom also for giving them as dowry in the marriages. All the Odissi dancers used filigree, beautifully made designs, but slowly they became more and more ornate, more heavy in use of silver, more broadly laid designs and flimsy. Now the trouble with next one. Now this is again a filigree work done from Trishnapalli. It's late 19th century. I think it's in VNA. Next one. Now this is the upper portion is from Cochin, and the lower one is a belt from Trishnapalli, where although the Cochin work is also very strong, beautifully made, it's a filigree perfume case. Now this is a welt-based belt, where the work is filigree all over the outside. But still, until the 19th century, the craftsmanship at those tea places, now we don't know of filigree work from Trishnapalli or Cochin. The Dhaka craftsmen migrated to Calcutta or other places after the partition of India in 1947. So now this is the end of these things. After that, if you want to see, I mean, the craftsmanship has deteriorated so badly that I don't know why silver, a precious metal, should not be used by better designs. You see, when the government is trying to promote filigree and with the various handicrafts, they should ensure that fine designs, sensibly designed things are exported instead of gold. I mean, there is a charm also. It depends on the design that it could be marketed properly all over the world. I think that's the last one.
I have 3 broad questions to ask Mittal sir. Really, from your experience and your background, I have such a loud voice, is to request you to advise us in the education of young people in the arts, what would you say are the most important components?
I think the most important is inspiring them to draw them to a painting or any craft so that they learn there is something and they should try to understand. But how do they understand? It's through proper education, giving the proper background about things. But before you give information about a particular craft or a style of painting, I think they should develop an eye. That's more important, but how do you develop eye? I'll say that if you listen to bad music, I mean, in a few days' time, you only like to enjoy that sort of music. If you read a wrong book, it's something like a railway line, you are on a wrong track. Read the right books. In our time, in Shantiniketan, when Nanbabu or Vinod Bihari Mukherjee wanted to explain to us about certain things, they showed this is beautiful, how beautiful, why it is beautiful, those things we basically learned. But these are not very difficult things. I must tell that my wife was also an artist. She has extremely very, very fine eye. Although she came from a village where there was no question of art, she studied in Shantiniketan, but in a few years' time with me and looking at good things when we both discussed, she developed an eye which I would say never in our life of collecting we differed on anything, whether it's a bronze or a craft object or a miniature painting. She may not be writing about this thing, but her aesthetic taste was, if that can happen in my own family, I mean, I think it can be easily, I mean, give them access, but where is this, now I'll challenge, where is this sort of facility given to our children? Even for those people who read art history, I mean, I see they have no idea about actual objects. They say about Mughal painting, Shahjahan period, Jahangir period. So I'll go back in time, some of the museum officials in our olden times, they had come from various different backgrounds. Either they were Sanskritists or only historians. If they had to answer about a Mughal painting, if it was Jahangir period, they will always say it is Jahangir period, but they don't know that portraits of Jahangir were being done in Rajasthan, in central India, in the Deccan. So that sort of description they had not developed. But this can come easily if you start with the right guidance. Give them exposure. If you are repeatedly listening to right music, classical music, fine dance of any style, whether it's Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, or anything, you develop, you listen to good music, whether it's Khayal or Dhuran, I mean anything. I mean you develop an ear, any wrong note. Although I don't know about music, but you try to sing a wrong thing. I just immediately. Same thing about color. I mean, I'm so sensitive to color in my life. Anything around, I just close my hand. If something jarring, it can develop. It can. After all, the human mind has great facilities. If it is touched at the right time, you develop faculty. That faculty has to be developed, and God has given all of us. It's not only in the genes, it's a separate thing. But I think some of these facilities are God's gift. They have to be guided, that's all.
Thank you very much. One of the things that you kept mentioning when you showed your beautiful slides is the age of decadence is upon us. The quality of the work has deteriorated enormously. That artists are leaving this profession and taking on other professions. That government schemes that were started a long time ago, just as a little background, Indian Handicrafts doesn't even have a ministry. There are two. There's a development commission for handicrafts and for handlooms, and they come under the Ministry of Textiles. which includes wood, metal, bamboo. Something as iconic as khadi, which is a very fine hand-spun, hand-woven textile, comes under the Ministry of Small-Scale Industry. So there is no government way by which we have a crafts policy to preserve, to encourage, you know, the great work that Kamla Deviji and Gopal Jayakar did have just, today you speak of a real tragedy in this field. What is it that we can do? What do you think we should do?
Shobita, I think perhaps you don't know, when Kamla Devi Chattopadhyaya became the chairman of Indian Handicrafts Board, although I had never accepted any job, I was selected to be the first director of designs to be in Hyderabad. There was some sort of rivalry between two chairmen, one in our state and with Kamla Devi, that why are you starting a center? That I told it is just to promote crafts. And I had very, very keen interest in crafts, in textiles, metal, or these things. So after 6 months of my getting pay, and this center had to be closed, and Kamla Devi ji told you, please go to Delhi, Bombay. No, I'm not going to now take up anything. That mission in my life is going to be different. And I set up this center, Jagdish and Kamla Mittal Museum. Unfortunately, we have not been able to function it in a way I had visualized, for whatever reasons. But most of these things about promoting craft through the museum, because when the objects are there, it would have been easy for me to inspire. So that I could have done. I mean, I wanted to have periodical demonstrations by the craftsmen. You see, craftsmen themselves in only some cases are designers. In some cases, for the highly superior quality objects, the design has to be done by someone else. Of course, I lectured in this place in 1985, a lecture of painters as designers of decorative art objects in Mughal period. I presented extended version of that in London also. That craftsman has that skill, but that skill, if for a very high quality design, someone else has to give a design. So this combination of two, like the Mughal painting, Akbar had painters, 3 or 4, one was for portrait, the other for coloring, like this. These sort of skills have to be combined. I had all that in my mind. But now what happens, why the deterioration? Because of certain factors, some of the people who were appointed, when the designs were not done, there was no coordination between different departments. The design, good design is lying as a sample, the craftsmen are asked to do something else. In the emporias, when the craftsman goes to sell the design, the person who is selecting the design is not at all competent. They realize it because someone has recommended, he gets a job. If he doesn't approve of the design, the craftsman can't sell. So all sorts of wrong factors started into the whole process. With the result, good designs, it's not that in our country they are not good designers, but unless the good design is marketed, you can't. See, unless a good sweet is being marketed, you will have to eat the laddus which you find in a village. If you are very sensitive, it's a good taste. If a good design is also like that, I mean, people will buy. I mean, you could have changed the whole concept of design and taste of the people. It was very fine chance to promote the crafts and improve the taste of the countrymen by proper designing of the objects, objects in your room, objects on your body, objects in your hands.
My last question is related to you as a collector. Just to explain to us some of the difficulties of collecting antiquities in India, of making this enormous collection that you have made, some of the some guidance on how we can go forward. in this field
No.
to encourage others to collect?
I think I was born in a time which was really the best time for collecting, I must say. After India became independent, some of these a very big exhibition which was organized at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. I was fortunate to be there again and again, repeatedly, and enjoy them. In meantime, Rai Krishna Rajji, Vasudeva Nagwal, Modi Chandra, Khandalawala used to come. I had a good chance to meet them. So they were inspiring factors. But how about getting these things? Fortunately, when India became independent, when the states were merged and there was financial crisis with the state people, some of the objects started coming in the market. Then people like us with even moderate means, if I give the biography of how I collected, I think it would shock many people. I have bought some paintings at a price no one would trust. As yesterday someone asked, are you 90? So like that people say, you bought a Basoli painting for 20 rupees? And yes. So, I mean, answers like this. So there were very good chances for collecting for people, and we were collecting. People like me with very modest means, I could start it. There were people who were inspired by Rakistan. I had created some collectors also who were doing. Unfortunately, when the source of supply was drying out, the Antique Act came. So Antique Act came at a time when already there was scarcity. So I don't know how this Antique Act has helped the museums in the country, where no more objects are being offered to the museum. The museums have stopped buying all the. So how retain? But I know for granted and personal knowledge, some of the best objects of the country went out of the country within a week of the Antique Act when it was involved. No one knows about this fact, but this act has harmed the country for this sort of misjudgment of the situation. You want to enact something when there is short supply, when the supply was about 5% compared to 10 years before, and you enact a bill. When Mr. Deshpande, who was the Director General of here, they came to Hyderabad, and we had a presentation where the Museum Association people had come, he was presiding. Then Mr. Deshpande, who has made the catalogue? And I have done. Is it? How many people you have to open? I'm the PN of the museum, I'm the collector of the museum, conservator of the museum, photographer of the museum. So in our museum, 30 people are not able to do this much. You show those pages, but it was shown. So like this, then I told Mr. Deshpande, you want to conquer Golconda Fort, but where is the staff to enact that? I mean, there are people, even in the museum, unfortunately, they are not able to judge, poor fellows, whether it's an old thing or not. Unnecessary litigations, unnecessary expenditure on the staff all over India with registration officers, but how much the country has gained by this act. In fact, the collectors who are doing the collection, the children or sons of the people who are collecting, now say, Father, why are you wasting? We can't sell it. Why? What's the use? So all these things, it was such a big setback to the collecting tendencies, the enthusiasm of the people. Now the people who have, they are not willing to show. It's lost to the scholars also. The people are not allowing them to photograph because someday they suppose they sell, they want to show the object was with them. So it is three-pronged harm. First to the museums, second loss to the collectors, second loss to the country. When the people like me, I mean, they're collecting objects and retaining the country with our most modest means, how the country has gained even 1% from this act.
Thank you very much, Mittal Saab. I think we have a room full of art historians and art lovers and lots of questions. So, yes.
Good morning. Mittalji, very few people become a legend in their lifetime. You certainly are one of them. It really is a privilege to get to spend time and see and hear you. Unlike the certain collections that have left our country, Ananda Kumaraswamy collection, Stella Kramrisch collection, it really is our fortune that your collection stays in our country and for the generations to come, especially the youngsters and our historians, scholars. You mentioned about few collectors, institutions like Kal Khandalawala. There are others also who come to mind who have interacted with you. For us, the youngsters, we haven't really met them. We've read about them, O.C. Ganguly, Shobhanath Putra, Ajit Ghosh. Perhaps if you could share some insights with your interactions with Kal Khandalawala and others, that would be great. Thank you very much.
I was fortunate to meet some of them. For example, when I was in second year in Shantiniketan, there was Dussehra vacations. Nandal Bose told, why are you going to Dehradun, where my family was living, you will waste 4 or 5 days. And these 10 days vacations, why don't you, he noticed that I'm interested to ask questions about miniatures. There was a small collection of the miniatures also in Shantiniketan. Why don't you go and see Ajit Ghosh's collection? So I went to see him, 42 Sham Bazar Street, Calcutta. Very elegantly dressed Bengali. Although then I was about 18 years age, when I requested that I want to see, he'll take up a piece like this. Then after enjoying it himself, Head will pass it on to me.
Lovely. Look at the smile, yes.
That touched me so much. There is something so charming, so interesting in art that it gives so much immense pleasure. That's Sublime Delight. I've used as the title of my book.
Sublime Delight.
Yes,
Sunita?
I just wanted to quickly ask
इसको दूसरा next.
That, we still have a reservoir of fine artwork which you find in small caches in the most unexpected places. What would be his considered advice? What is the future of small museums and small private museum owners? Because I think that has to come about for things to stay within the country and for things to generate interest for other generations.
I think next year, Nandal Bose went to Banaras to show us Sarnath, and fortunately there was a meeting between Rai Krishna Das, the Doyen of Indian art, who had, I think, the best I ever met about aesthetics in art. So in the evening there was a meeting. We sat 4 or 5 students, 10 students around Nanda Babu, and again the same thing. When Rai Sahab took the thing, he enjoyed his thing from the museum, pass it to Nanda Babu, then he'll say, why this is this. Then Nanda Babu will also like. So by 1 hour meeting, I became so restless. So restless, I mean, what is this charm? So I think, where can we find something? So I had only 10 rupees in my pocket. Went to the Thateri Gali where I found there was a small shop from these people. Went and bought a drawing for 2 rupees. So that was the beginning to get that sort of pleasure which these people are getting, and that led me on the way it continued. Now, again, the small museums, I realize it's a very difficult thing. I know of a number of collectors who collect with enthusiasm without understanding. There are collectors who collect with love. There are collectors who collect only for investment. The knowledge of these things is not only enough to have the aesthetic eye or enjoy, that once you have started collecting, you should feel responsible for the objects which you are collecting. You should be competent to take care of them technically, proper DSC. Don't try to mount them yourself without knowing. Don't try to clean them without knowing. If you can know these skills, otherwise take advice of someone. The small museum collectors, I would say, if they are small collectors, I'll request the National Museum to once organize. There are, say, collectors who have 20 good objects, 30 objects, 50 objects, have an exhibition, joint exhibition of all these at one place. So these collectors are guided also. They are individually doing in some small places where there is no facility or education how to protect them, keep them. So all these things can be directed to the right channels by some sort of organization, not much expense, that we can save some of these small collectors, their objects of good quality, and they can be kept in good shape, promoted, and they will feel elevated, and the objects will have safe future.
Mittalji, I just want to thank you for a fantastic, interesting talk. And the first is a comment that you made that really struck me as important, which is that we have to imbibe good taste, and we ourselves have to set the bar for that. And you've done that very wonderfully through your whole life. One request that I have which comes out of that is that you share this more with the public, because I do think that imbibing the level of art and artifacts that you have collected and sharing your taste is what is going to raise the bar. That's a comment I wanted to make. And the second is a question, something that you raised in your talk, which really sort of gels with my own thinking, that we need more, even today, artisans need more artists involved in their process. And can you tell us a little bit more about can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you just touched on it in your talk.
No, the quality, I mean, there are some good designers, there is no doubt about it. Occasionally, varieties of people sometimes meet, and if I can inspire, I try to inspire. But then, next stage is a failure, because if they get some good design, we have to get them executed. Who will finance for making, say, for example, a BIDRI or filigree? So, if there is a coordinated effort, it is not an impossible task. It is not at all an impossible. And I think that would be a very big service to the country if some good designs initially, if they are marketing, you see what the craftsman wants, that he wants to sell his objects. If his good designs made by some designers are marketed and he gets a market, he would be very happy. So to make the task simple, there should be some effort to have some good designs, then entrust to, there are people like Rajiv Sethi, I mean the great designers in the country, who have, give them to the craftsman, get them, then someone should sell, take the responsibility. The craftsman himself is not a marketman, he doesn't know how to sell. But the intermediary body should be decent enough so most of the profit goes to them rather than to the craftsman. Craftsman should benefit. So if there's some concerted effort, but not in many directions, in some directions at least, if you make a good beginning, if you are able to market objects made by the craftsman, it will save them time which he wastes in marketing. Like the art galleries, some people say that these galleries taking 30–40%. I mean, then you are wrong. The artist, I say, I advise you are wrong. You are saving time, making 3 days here, 2 days here, wasting your. Why don't you use that time for creating and think what is 60% you are getting is enough for your work. Let someone help you and do this work. This sort of thing can be done if the craftsman time is honestly saved.
I'm very fortunate that I had the opportunity to have lived in Hyderabad and having met you. I worked with the filigree craftsmen very closely, and in my understanding at that point, which was 25 years ago, was that the major difference between the Karimnagar filigree and the Cuttack filigree was that Karimnagar was 95% pure, and with the soldering 92.5 is what they had declared at that point, and Cuttack was 70 or 75%. In your experience, do they continue to maintain this kind of purity today?
I mean, at least even today, it's slightly better because the type of soldering which Cuttack uses is different, but the craftsmanship execution also differs, as I showed you. Even the present day Karimnagar work compared to the Cuttack work, although there are good craftsmen, if they are properly guided, they can do better work. I think in both places, even in Karimnagar, there is misguided direction. I'm not saying that always Cuttack was bad or something like this, but misdirection is leading both of these centers in the wrong directions. I'm not showing a film which someone made, Surabhi Foundation, or filigree and BIDRI, I could have shown here. I mean, I think I will say they ask the government prohibited making any filigree or BIDRI if that is the design. So I'm not showing with a purpose because always I have got hope in future and things can improve, but if we think that our crafts have deteriorated to that extent, I say stop.
Stop.
One, I noticed that you're talking about who the designers were for BIDRI work. In one of your BIDRI lotas, I saw that the floral design was almost the same as in the Kani shawls. Now, in those old days, what was, how did this design and craftsman?
No, certain designs become fashionable, and if it is being appreciated in one particular thing, whether it first comes in a textile or first comes into the metal, I think it becomes a trend that's being appreciated in other craft forms also, whether it starts from textile or whether it starts from BIDRI. In a given milieu, in a given region, there is a style, or I would say a style. In Rajasthan, you will find certain designs common in various things, wood architecture, like Mughal floral design, which was used in marble work, in metal work, sometimes in carpets. So these are certain features which are an important factor about any craft. They became in a period, and when appreciated, they spread to other areas. So a Kashmiri design can be used in sometimes Himru work even today. So, but Himru work actually the adaptation is in different time. So these things, when they are, it's the market which is spreading the design. If the market is enjoying a certain design, that designs become popular in various areas.